She did not cry out when she discovered her husband lying face down in the clear creek. She only let out a sharp cry when she spotted Jack Harland emerging from the haze the following dawn. Emma Hale had been a widow for 3 months now, and in Laramie, that was plenty of time for people to let your name fade from memory. But the worry in her gaze that morning caused every farmhand along the road to glance her way twice. Even though none dared to inquire why she had galloped through town with her skirt ripped and her fingers trembling, she paused for no one. She pressed on beyond the farrier's forge, beyond the tavern where a couple of fellows hawked their chew at her mare, beyond the chapel steps where the minister offered a sympathetic tilt of his head she couldn't quite believe. She continued riding until she arrived at the one homestead everyone claimed was owned by a fellow who knew no fear. If this fellow sent her packing, well, there'd be no other refuge left. Jack Harland. Most people in Laramie barely murmured his name. Some described him as a silent tempest. Others figured he was why the old Chisholm Path still boasted a marshal. But what everyone seemed to concur on was straightforward. If danger came knocking and you had no other escape, you headed to the Harland spread and hoped he was feeling generous that day. Emma didn't offer a prayer. She thudded her heels into the soil and strode straight toward him as he portioned out minerals to a young colt. Jack glanced up, deliberate as the first light of day, and she could have sworn his gaze pierced through every deception anyone had ever fed her. For the first time since the burial, she sensed someone was truly seeing her, not merely her morning gown. He inquired if she'd been trailed. She gave a quick nod. Then she shared it all, every detail she held. The slashed barriers at her property near the slopes of the granite peaks, the stones hurled into her spring, the silhouette that drifted by her pane at the stroke of midnight, the murmur beyond her stable insisting a lone woman couldn't claim ground in Montana territory. Jack absorbed it all without so much as a flutter of his eyelids. A breeze swept grit over his spurs. The colt twitched its ears as if it sensed peril drawing near out there. Even the steeds could tell when a gale was gathering force. And this didn't seem the sort that delivered showers. When Emma at last uttered the name Victor Slade, Jack's chin set firm for just a moment, like a fellow feeling an ancient wound twinge. He recognized that name. Who didn't? Livestock baron, property grabber. The one who insisted her spouse's passing was merely a mishap along the route. Emma edged nearer. Her words faltered. She explained she hadn't come seeking sympathy. She was there because somebody coveted her acres, and somebody yearned for her to vanish, and she needed a partner who wouldn't flinch at shadows. Jack brushed his palms clean, gazed at the ridges, then turned back to her as if gauging the fire still burning in her core. He posed a single query, soft-spoken, the sort that shapes the tale before it's truly begun. Are you prepared for whatever revelations this might unearth? And Emma replied with one of her own. What if those revelations cut deeper than the soul who took my husband's life? Jack readied his mount without further delay, and Emma rode alongside him the entire journey back to Hale Homestead, striving not to dwell on the expression that had crossed his face when she'd mentioned Victor Slade. It wasn't dread. It was icier, like a recollection he preferred to leave buried. By the hour they pulled up at the homestead, the midday light was dissolving into that stark Montana amber that etched every outline crueler than intended. Emma kept chatting to fend off the specters in her thoughts. She gestured to the sagging rail, the strewn fodder, and the thud she'd caught behind the shed. Jack merely inclined his head, kneeling to examine impressions in the earth she hadn't spied till now. He offered no interpretations, he rarely did, but as he rose, she caught it in his stance, assurance. An intruder had prowled here. He made for the veranda, where a hefty bundle of straw slumped partly shattered against the weathered chest Emma had wrestled with that very morning. A flush of chagrin warmed her cheeks at the memory. She'd huffed and tugged at the blasted thing for a solid 10 minutes before surrendering. Jack rapped its flank, probing the structure, then met his eyes with the faintest curve of amusement. "It's far too cumbersome for you to haul alone. Too cumbersome. Just perch there for a moment so I can inspect these supports." The casual lilt in his tone drew an eye roll from her, but her heartbeat quickened all the same. It wasn't fair how effortlessly a seasoned man like him could stir that, especially one who spoke so sparingly. She approached the straw bundle, hiking her hem just high enough to avoid a snag, and braced to settle so he might examine the timber fastenings beneath. That's when it reached her ears, a faint, parched, quivering noise, akin to pebbles shifting in a metal container. It rose from directly below her soles. Emma grew rigid, her inhale snagged in her chest. She peered downward. A plump diamondback slithered free from the thatch, its rattler vibrating, its crown lifting, stare locked on the very spot she'd meant to claim. She drew in a gasp and reeled away, her boot snagging the veranda's rim, sending her tumbling sharply backward. Jack lunged for her on pure reflex, and they teetered on the brink of collapse, his grip firm about her midsection to steady her, her fingers bunching his collar as she leaned into his frame. Only then, with her breath still ragged against him, did he unholster his sidearm. A single crisp report split the quiet. The serpent crumpled, lifeless, without a quiver. Emma gaped at the coiled form sprawled precisely where her limbs had hovered. Had she lowered herself a pulse beat earlier, this account would have closed right there on those boards. A shiver raced over her flesh, her gut churned, and for the first instant she pondered if the creature had truly strayed there by chance. Because as Jack lifted the carcass for a closer look, his features hardened in a manner that chilled her to the marrow. Why did the serpent bear a cord's imprint encircling its tail? Jack cradled that lifeless diamondback as if it were evidence from a foul deed, not mere wildlife. Emma observed his scrutiny, steady yet keen, reminiscent of a veteran scout poring over a trail in the loam. He rotated the form a touch, and there it lingered, a slender groove etched into the hide at the base, as though somebody had bound the beast, transported it, and released it right where she'd intended to rest. Emma felt the fine hairs on her forearms prickle, not from terror this time, but from an anger she'd thought interred alongside her late husband. Someone desired her absence. Someone aimed to frighten her into flight, or render her heedless enough to perish. And that someone knew her routines, the paths she trod, the seats she favored come morning with her brew. Jack placed the serpent aside and brushed his fingers deliberately, unhurriedly. He didn't elevate his tone, he didn't swear. He scarcely seemed startled. He merely appeared weary of those who fancied they commanded the breadth of the territory. He asked Emma if she'd spotted anything absent, displaced, amiss, in any fashion. She shook her head, even as the straw bundle's odd tilt resurfaced in her mind, along with the barrier slats shoved beneath it, as if hurried hands had meddled. Jack circled the veranda, tracing boot traces. Emma trailed him, noting how he indicated scuffed patches of ground, snapped fibers, trifles she'd have overlooked entirely. Then he singled out a lone imprint by the edge of the dwelling, one bearing a pronounced gouge in the heel, the very mark she'd glimpsed on Victor Slade's trail foreman's footwear. She gulped. Jack uttered no name. He had no call to. Emma voiced it instead. "It's Victor. It must be."
Jack rubbed his hands along his trousers, eyed the distant tree line, and permitted the quiet to settle between them. Certain matters require no declaration. They both grasped the sole nomenicon that matched those signs. He told her they wouldn't linger for the subsequent serpent. They wouldn't rely on the marshal's aid. They'd orchestrate the snare themselves, and snare the rogue who presumed dominion over her holdings, and resolve this ere it claimed her. The plan he outlined was simple, yet it hummed with peril enough to set her veins thrumming. She wasn't the woman she had been 3 months prior. She felt fortified now, as if an inner resolve had at last roused to resist. Jack queried if she was truly ready, wholly committed, seeing as once they commenced, retreat was impossible. Emma regarded the fallen serpent, the impressions in the soil, the fellow who'd anchored her amid the fall. She dipped her chin. If you're finding this story compelling, why not subscribe to catch the continuation? And as you ease back with a steaming mug of something soothing, share the hour where you are and the spot from which you're hearing this. Emma scarcely dozed that evening, not from dread, but from how Jack's strategy looped in her thoughts, relentless as a raptor circling prey. Come first light, the pair were already at work across the homestead, hushed and intent, arranging every element to Jack's precise design. He explained the key to ensnaring a like type of victor lay in restraint. You didn't pursue him. You permitted the illusion that he pursued you.
Thus Emma enacted her role. She ventured into Laramie past mid-morning, her boots caked in dust, tresses unbound, appearing every inch the frayed sole. She halted at the mercantile, then the stables. Then she sauntered directly by the tavern where Victor favored lingering on mild afternoons. She feigned obliviousness, naturally drawing his stare all the fiercer. Each stride beyond that threshold felt like teetering on a precipice without barrier, until he emerged onto the planking and inquired after her well-being. She permitted her posture to droop, just so, to convey surrender. She confessed to restless nights, to a viper that had lunged at her, to Jack departing for his own grounds, leaving her solitary come dusk at Hale Homestead. She even infused a quiver into her timbre as she added, "I've been pondering. Perhaps you had the right of it about parting with the place. A solitary woman can't cling to such a spread indefinitely." Then came the phrase Jack had rehearsed with her. "I'm unsure if I can endure this struggle much longer. Perhaps yielding the property would prove simpler." Victor regarded her with a cat-line satisfaction, as if the latch on the henhouse had yielded at last. He bade her a fine day and expressed hope she'd choose wisely. Emma inclined her head courteously, wheeled her mare, and departed with the poise of a cleric. Yet the instant Hale Homestead came into view, her facade crumbled. Jack awaited in the hayloft, sighting down his long arm. A pair of his reliable hands lurked by the pump, concealed. Emma felt more secure than in an age. Twilight descended swiftly. The heavens bruised to violet, the earth tempered till even the meadows appeared to hush their sighs. Emma kindled a single lantern within and left the entry ajar, artfully neglectful. She sat at the board with her pulse echoing like a toll in a sanctuary. When the initial hoof-palls echoed, 3 mounts advancing measured, purposeful, like stalkers, not callers, she recognized the hour. Emma rose and clasped the compact firearm Jack had entrusted her. She recalled. She wasn't mere lure, she formed the mechanism. Tonight's outcome would determine if she lingered as quarry or claimed rightful stewardship of this soil. A form darkened the threshold, a figure with a kerchief at his throat and a smirk suggesting prior ventures. He bade her gather her belongings and depart without fuss. She directed him skyward. The skirmish that ensued lacked elegance. It was raw, clamorous, authentic. Emma brandished a timber stool at his visage. He reeled. She discharged once into the planking, not to strike, but to summon the reckoning she trusted waited in the gloom. That report hauled Jack out of concealment swift as a bolt. And with that, the snare engaged. Yet what Jack encountered beyond the dwelling surpassed even his foresight. Who lurked by the shed, and why did he appear more cornered than menacing? Jack attained the shed's flank, long arm leveled, primed to conclude matters. But the figure huddled behind the cistern wasn't leveling a barrel his way. He quivered, palms uploft, gaze flitting like a snared beast. He murmured he never intended harm to Emma, that compulsion from Victor had drawn him. He admitted Victor had compensated handsomely for the viper. He revealed Victor's scheme to raise the homestead once Emma was removed. That's when Emma grasped this transcended mere turf and barriers. It sought to erase her very mark from existence. His timber fractured, as if he'd traversed a weary path of trepidation to this juncture. Jack eased his long arm fractionally, granting the man air. Then he advanced and posed the question Emma had dreaded uttering for months. Why did Victor crave her holding so fervently? The man disclosed a new stock path Victor sought to monopolize, a bypass slicing clean through Hale Homestead, a thoroughfare poised to amass fortune and amplify his influence in Laramie. Emma attended from the entry, grit tangled in her locks, the sidearm yet unsteady in her grasp. She felt an inner pivot, not alarm, not anger, but something more anchored, more resolved. Jack gestured to his hands, and as one they conveyed the man to town or the sun crested. Laramie stirred to an admission that rippled like brushfire, an admission of slaying, coercion, the viper, the intent to torch the spread. It sufficed for the marshal to muster a dozen souls and haul Victor Slade from his ornate stoop prior to the morning breakfast. When the dust settled, the settlement seemed altered, serener, unburdened. Somehow, folks doffed their brims to Emma for the first occasion, not as a bereft house, but as one who'd weathered an ordeal crafted to shatter her. Bearing esteem rather than commiseration felt peculiar upon her frame, yet it suited more snugly than foreseen. And she hadn't achieved it in solitude. That twilight, Emma and Jack claimed the very straw bundle where the diamondback had lain in wait. The vault above the granite peaks glowed with that gentle aureate hue reserved for the calm after tumult. Jack remarked how the terrain had a manner of assaying souls, much as existence assays them. He observed, you can't select the trying stretches, merely how you endure them. Emma offered a gentle curve of her lips. She confided she wearied of solitary vigil. Jack held his peace. He lingered wordless for a stretched beat. Then he cradled her palm upward, his thumb grazing the roughened pads she'd garnered these recent moons, tender, deliberate, ere enfolding her digits within his clasp. And perhaps therein lies the moral of it all. At times, existence fells you that you might discern who will lend a hand to rise anew. At times, apprehension unveils the fortitude you never suspected. Perhaps you've known that feeling firsthand. The instant you reflect and comprehend you've outlasted what you deemed your undoing. And sometimes the soul you rely on most materializes precisely when you cease your flight. Ere we turn to the next story, permit me a question. What course would you have charted in Emma's stead? And who might you wish at your flank when adversity descends? If this account stirred a chord within you, lend it a nod of approval and subscribe to ensure the subsequent installment. Now, draw breath from your vessel, nestle comfortably, and share the locale from whence you tune in.